I'm Femi OK, and you are watching the stream. For the past 6 years, Al Jazeera and the stream has covered the war in Yemen and its disastrous impact on civilians down on the ground. So, what impact could a new United States president have on the outcome of the war in Yemen? Here's President Joe Biden.
This war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales. At the same time, Saudi Arabia faces missile attacks, UAV strikes, and other threats from Iranian-supplied forces in multiple countries. We're going to continue to support and help Saudi Arabia defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity and its people.
Is the war in Yemen, is it about to end? Is that end in sight? If you have a take, experiences, stories to share, you know what to do. On YouTube, you can jump right into the comment section and be part of today's program. How are residents in Sanaa, in Yemen, reacting to this news? Take a look.
We don't trust what the Americans say at all because they participated in a part of the war. We can't trust them. If they want us to trust them, they should stop the war directly and immediately. They participated in the war with Saudi Arabia. So how can we believe them now?
This is the start of peace and good for Yemen. The most important thing is that the Americans are honest. If they are really positive people, they should respond to the demands of the Yemeni people to stop this war. The first step is to compensate for everything destroyed in Yemen. Losses in souls, lands, properties, factories, everything.
Passionate views from down on the ground. I'm excited to introduce our lineup so that they can share their views with you as well. Afra, good to see you again. Welcome back to the stream. Remind our audience who you are and what you do.
So my name is Afrah Nasser, and I work as the Yemen researcher at Human Rights Watch, and I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden.
Nice to have you. Sanaa, it's always great to get your analysis on the stream. Welcome back. Remind our audience who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Femi. I am Sanaa Hamdani, and I am a Yemen analyst. I've been working on Yemen for the last 11 years at least. I was born and raised in Yemen, and I spent 13 years working in Washington, D.C. And what I do is I help decipher what's happening in Yemen. So this is my safe.
This is your wheelhouse. Yeah, excellent. Safa, we can never have too many analysts on the stream. So one more, good to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. Tell our audience who you are, what you do.
Thank you, Femi, for having me. My name is Safa Kerman. I am a Yemeni journalist, a political analyst, and I am a researcher on the racial supremacy caste aspect of the Yemeni conflict, which I became aware of when I started my graduate studies at Harvard Law School in 2017.
Yes, I'm really intrigued by what happened, what went through your mind when President Joe Biden announced his foreign policy priorities. Have a look here. This looks so grand from the White House. Remarks by President Biden on America's place in the world. What difference does it even make, Safa, about what the US is doing in terms of their foreign policy and Yemen?
It does make a huge difference. It is an important step to stop the American support for the Saudi Emirati-led coalition. But the question is it an enough step? Usually when it comes to conflicts, the people who broker peace deals or the parties involved are usually put between the choices of doing the right thing or doing the necessary thing. And at this stage, I think the Biden administration is at the stage of doing the necessary thing. But what I'm concerned about is that they're doing the necessary thing in not the right way. So, for example, revoking the Houthis' designation as a terrorist organization, it is the necessary thing, considering the humanitarian access and the legal consequences of such designation that it will constrain humanitarian aid, but giving the Houthis this revoking without putting any pressure on them, at least to give full access for the international organizations to deliver aid, is considered by so many Yemenis as the Biden administration giving the Houthis
Right.
a green light. And that is what happened with them right after the revocation, attacking Saudi Arabia and now launching military campaign against Marib inside Yemen.
Sama, I want to show you something because we shared today's subject with our audience. I have a look here on my laptop. We tweeted out what the subject was. We talked about President Joe Biden, his tweaks to foreign policy. And then we got this take from Good Name is Better Than Gold. It is a good move because frequent weapon supply to those coalitions is what is escalating the situation, thereby killing will continue. That is one of our audience's take. Sama, thoughts?
My thoughts are is that the Biden administration had chosen to define itself with what's going to happen in Yemen. That's quite interesting because Yemen went from a file that was attached to Saudi Arabia and the Iranian-Saudi proxy war to being right and center in the middle. So we're going to see and hear a lot more about Yemen because the Biden administration made sure that it's at the forefront. Now, what's frozen is approximately $36.5 billion worth of weapons. Of course, we're all talking about a temporary freeze that's under review. This may not hold forever. And I highly suspect that after there's an announced ceasefire in Yemen that holds, that the US is likely to continue selling arms and weapons to Saudi Arabia. Now, what we're seeing is that the Biden administration is responding to 6 years of humanitarian lobbying in Washington, D.C. The removal of the Houthi designation as a foreign terrorist organization goes straight to the fact that Yemeni people are starving and there's a massive humanitarian crisis there. So the move is not going easy on the Houthis as much as it is a humanitarian lens. And I think what Biden is trying to say here is that he wants to employ diplomacy. He wants to employ diplomacy in Yemen's war. It doesn't mean that he's going to just switch a few things and there will be a ceasefire in Yemen. Everybody knows that it's very complicated. And I highly suspect that anybody working with President Biden is that naive.
Afra, I have to play this comment to you. It is from Bara. He belongs to a group called Reprieve. They're a legal action NGO. I'm sure you know they defend people suffering from human rights abuses worldwide. He has a very clear idea on what's happening right now with US foreign policy. Have a listen, Afra.
The Biden administration decision to revoke the Houthis designation was a fatal mistake. The Houthis will not receive this as a sign of goodwill, but rather, they will see it as a sign of weakness. After all, they were rewarded without giving any concessions. In fact, the following day, they fired a ballistic missile on the city of Marib, a city that is home to 1.8 million residents, and launched a huge offensive on the city. As many people don't know this, but this conflict is not one-sided. Stopping the disarmament of one side while leaving the other side fully armed will not achieve peace.
Afra, go ahead.
First, I want to applaud the all-female panel that you're having. It's just heartwarming to have all-female panel. And it's such an important topic, and I think it's very complicated to discuss this in just 20 minutes. I think the 6 years long war in Yemen has divided the country, fragmented the country, and I think what Bara is saying could apply to many other factions in the country as well. So as we speak, there are multiple violations, IHL violations, laws of war violations committed by many armed groups, not only the Houthi armed group, but every day I am I get to know about a new armed group that are whether detaining people or committing other form of violations against civilians in the country in different parts in Yemen, and in the north, in the south, in the east, across all Yemen. So I think the UN administration position, it just gives us a small glimpse of what needs to be done towards this conflict. But as Safa was saying, this is not enough. We need more than this. There are multiple armed groups in the country, and it's just very difficult to see how you can really gather all these groups in one table and discuss the end of the fighting. So it's just a very complicated situation.
I'm not going to help the complicated situation because I am going to go to YouTube right now. I have 3 different questions I'm going to give to all of you guests. I want instant responses, not long analysis, instant responses. YouTube, excellent questions. Abel, Yemen people should be left free of interference from outsiders so they can sort out their own mess, period. Safa, instant response, brief one, please.
I agree 100%. That is what should be done. But as a matter of reality, that is not what is happening on the ground. So Saudi Arabia Yemen is considered, when it comes to the American foreign policy, is considered as a Saudi issue. And this is one of the core reasons of the conflict. Biden said in his statement, the war has to end, but then said, we will protect Saudi Arabia's sovereignty, the integrity of its territory and its people. He should use the same sentence in protecting the sovereignty of the Yemeni state and the integrity of the Yemeni territory and the integrity of the Yemeni people. By first, the American administration, not considering Yemen as a Saudi matter, but as the person on YouTube commented, if Yemen should be left to its own people, maybe the conflict will be
pushing on now. This is Yunus Ahmed. Yunus Ahmed, I'm going to give this one to you, Afra. Biden's announcement is pure political rhetoric. All the US needs to do is stop enforcing the air and sea blockade on Yemen.
It's not as simple as that. Yes, the blockade has to end by the Saudi-led coalition, by the Houthi siege tactics like in Taiz and even towards or around Marib. It's not as simple as that. There are no clean hands in the conflict in Yemen. Every party has responsibility in ending the suffering of the civilians.
Sanaa, this one's really interesting, and we get this almost every time we have an international situation where there's a big conflict and people care about it. Why doesn't the UN just stop this?
Oh, I wouldn't count on the UN to stop this, but I think the UN can bring everybody's support and kind of work together to stop it. What we've seen in Yemen is a massive role for the UN, especially in 2012. And 2013, when the UN moderated a national dialogue conference. It was supposed to help Yemen avoid the conflict that it's in now. We've had 3 different UN envoys since the war started, and the current UN envoy just visited Iran for the first time yesterday. So in a sense, it's good that he is putting all the effort that he can moving forward, but what the UN can do is very limited because it has to be backed by the EU, by the US, by the UK, by all these powerful nations that can kind of push the role of the UN forward.
This is just such a desperate situation for civilians in Yemen. Have a look here on my laptop. This is from the UNFPA, United Nations Population Fund. After years of conflict, Yemen remains the world's worst humanitarian crisis. There's a 2021 appeal. If we were being very candid, Afra, about what is happening down on the ground right now, how would you describe the situation?
Life has become unbearable for millions of civilians, and we know that from our work in Human Rights Watch that parties to the conflict have exaggerated the already dire humanitarian situation. So even before the war, Yemen was regarded as the poorest Arab nation. So the conflict just has devastated the country. The Houthi armed group are responsible of aid obstruction, especially in the north part of Yemen, where the largest portion of the population are living. Other parties within the Yemeni government and the UAE-backed forces in the south also are responsible of aid obstruction. So it's a man-made disaster. The humanitarian crisis in Yemen is not a natural disaster. It's not something that the civilians chose to happen. It's like a systematic taxes and practices, abusive practices by the parties to the conflict that led to this humanitarian crisis.
We spoke earlier to Gillian Moyes. She's the Yemen Deputy Country Director for Save the Children. This is what she told us. Have a listen, have a look.
Yemen's children have suffered untold horrors over the last 6 years of war. Their schools and hospitals have been attacked, and they've had to watch as their brothers and sisters starve to death. And now Yemen is facing the prospect of famine again. At least 20,000 children are at risk of starvation, and as humanitarian workers, we see the reality of this on a daily basis. So Save the Children welcomes these steps from the United States because they will enable us and other humanitarians to better access children and families in desperate need. But what Yemen's children need most of all is concrete steps towards lasting peace, because this is the only thing that will ensure they have the future they deserve.
Safa, it's impossible to disagree with that. What would you add to that, though? Lasting peace.
What I would
How do we
add,
get there?
Yeah, I think how we get there is the most important question. And to answer that, we need to start with truth telling. The Biden administration, I mean, what is happening now in the United States is exactly what is happening in Yemen. The Biden administration needs to look at Yemen and the Yemeni people through the American lens. The Houthis, I would describe them as the proud boys of the US. The attack of the Capitol was like what happened on September 21st, 2014. So how do you negotiate with hate? How do you negotiate with people whose ideology is mainly built on your non-existence or subordination? So if you want to alleviate seriously and honestly the humanitarian crisis, you need to know the core of the problem, because all parties are using this crisis as a conduct of war. So whenever there is a step towards peace, the Houthis or the other party, mainly the Houthis, they will launch a military attack or make the humanitarian crisis worse, so the international community would actually bend to their demands and give them whatever they want in the peace process. So Yemen, the solution, the peace, there is no peace, no accountability without truth telling. And the truth, as I said, the Houthis are supremacists. How do you negotiate with them? Saudi Arabia is a country that sees Yemen's success of the democratic experiment as an existential threat to its monarchy. So how do you trust Saudi Arabia with the political process in Yemen when it sees its democratic process as a threat to it? How do you negotiate with the Houthis and trust them with the humanitarian, with alleviating the humanitarian crisis when they do not see the humanity of the others? So the US has so many leverages to push Saudi Arabia and the Houthis. They still have until May 21st, I think, I'm not sure about the date exactly, but until May, I personally believe that they should revoke the designation of the Houthis, because as a matter of law, it's gonna constrain the humanitarian aid. But as a matter of reality, when you approach them and negotiate them, put this fact in your background, that they are just like the white supremacists in the US. So you need to start with like negotiating. Don't give them a plain check, a white check. Do whatever you want. Saudi Arabia respect the sovereignty of the Yemeni state and the integrity of the Yemeni people.
Afra, go ahead.
Can I add? I agree with so many things that Safa just mentioned, and it was very interesting that she put the parallel between what was happening at the Capitol Hill and what's happening in Yemen, and I just it came flashback to me what so many senators were talking about, the lack of accountability in the US and how that white supremacy act could repeat itself again without accountability. And I think in Yemen, without justice, there will not be peace. And it's very important for the US and the international community really to support all efforts for justice in Yemen. And that means that to make sure that all abusive actors are held accountable for what they are doing in Yemen. And that should be part of any conversation where we talk about the end of the war. Without it, I think we will just continue being in this vicious circle of violence and misery and pain.
That is such Yes, go ahead, Summer. Please go ahead.
Sorry, if I may interject. I always notice on TV that we have this dichotomy of narrative in Yemen. It's either war or peace. And in the past, we didn't want the war. There's this illusion that if the war ends, then it's a gift to the Houthis. When in reality, the war made the Houthis who they are. This war made them so powerful and gave them this much land. They were not this powerful at the start of the war. This is something that we really need to remember. So the continuation of the war, in a sense, is continuing their power and continuing their influence on the ground. And so I actually do think that the Biden administration is doing the right thing by exploring diplomacy. And for the designation of the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, the Yemeni people don't have to pay the price of what the Houthis are doing. There are other ways. And again, this is where the dichotomy happens. It's not a yes or no situation. You can sanction specific leaders without hurting the rest of the country. And I think the level of suffering that Yemen is at, this designation not only is going to cause millions of Yemenis to starve and die, it's actually going to make the US the culprit, the direct criminal of killing them. And I think that's even a worse position for America to be in than the position that they were in before.
Can I add something, Femi?
Sure, go ahead. Do you know, we're talking about Houthi and the Houthis' control of Yemen. So I just want to squeeze in a little comment here, because it was such a powerful analogy, likening them to the Proud Boys. That is such an incredible way of describing them. But this is recently what a Houthi government minister said about peace. Have a listen, have a look, guess.
We are ready for peace with all available means, providing that there be a just peace, a real peace, and that there are things that materialise on the ground. The most important thing we want to see in the coming period is no interception of oil derivatives for the citizens, no interception of food for the citizens, and to start arrangements for peace, a ceasefire, and to completely lift the blockade. God willing, the Yemeni people will see achievements from the government in Sanaa.
So, guess we are in the last 2 minutes of this show, so I am going to be in a difficult position of saying your final thoughts, Safa, Sama, Afra, about where we are right now, and to wrap up this conversation. 30 seconds. Safa.
I would say that let me frame it this way. The American dream is a global dream, and the American nightmare is a global nightmare. The difference is to which extent one can pursue the dream and to which extent one can eliminate the nightmare. Yemen, tomorrow, by the way, is the 10th anniversary of the Arab Spring. The Yemenis rose up to have the values of democracy, integrity, and then the Houthi supremacist militias took over the government, just as the white supremacists
an amazing, people-driven, young people. Uprising.
The last thing,
Safa, we're at the end of the show. We hear you. Thank you. I want to share this with your fellow co-panelists. Summer, final thought.
The final thought is that nothing is going to change overnight. Ceasefire in Yemen does not mean peace. Rebuilding Yemen is going to take years. The Houthis are not going to suddenly change and become a peaceful group. The war is going to
Thank you
continue
so much.
in some form.
Right.
But
Thank
I
you
hope
so much
peace
for your
happens.
analysis
Thank you.
and for helping us understand this situation that we're in right now with US foreign policy and Yemen. Afra, Sama, Safa, YouTube guests, thank you for being part of today's show. Appreciate you. Goodbye.